Okay.
In 1985, I had laser surgery for my eyes. Otherwise, the doctor said I had a good chance of going blind. So at that time, I was treated with laser, and then I had to use drops in my eyes from then on. But I need to go back a little bit and tell you about when my grandchildren were born. My first grandchild was born in 1970 on June the 29th. And his
68.
name... Pardon?
68.
I mean 68, I'm sorry, I said 70. My two second grandchildren were born in 1970. My first one was born on June the 29th in 1968. And did I tell you that Mike played? Yes, I told you about Michael playing ball for the St. Louis Cardinals. Well, John was born while he was still with the St. Louis Cardinals, and they lived in Arlington, Texas. Well, there was nobody prouder, I guess, of John than myself and his mom and dad, and also his other grandmother. But at the time when they'd come back, they were staying with the grandmother. Well, we went over to see John when he was first born, which was, I was trying to remember what day. Anyway, the following weekend, we went back over, and he was about a week old. So we could have some pictures made with him, because we'd gone to the hospital. Janae was still in the hospital at that time. And I said, where's the pictures you've got of John? Well, we haven't taken any yet. And I said, well, Doris, I said, have you had your picture made with John? Well, no, she said, Sister is kind of a little bit skeptical about letting me hold him. And so I just went in and got him and picked him up, and I said, well, we're going to have our pictures made with our first grandchild. And Mike come in, he said, Mother, did you ask Janae? I said, no, this is my first grandchild. And I said, I'm not going to hurt this child. I said, we're going to have our pictures made with him. Well, I guess because I was the mother-in-law, Janae didn't say anything. So Doris and I had our pictures made with John. And Mike was a little bit unhappy, but I said, y'all are, you know, he's not going to break. I said, he's a little boy. So anyway, but still, Janae was so particular about him. And I would come over and I'd say, I could come over and keep John. She said, no. She said, you know, that's not necessary. So we didn't get to, we saw him whenever we wanted to. It wasn't that she minded us seeing him. She just wanted to do everything for him herself. Well, I was a first mother one time, and I knew how she felt, except I was always glad for my mama to take him off my hands for a little while. Of course, I had 3 younger brothers, and Janae had a younger sister also, but I don't know what kind of care she had of her. But anyway, it wasn't in about 2 years later, their second child was born. And I told Michael, I said, Michael, I said, would you like me to come over and stay with Janae? Oh, no, he said, she's worked it out with her mother. Her mother's going to come stay with us, because they'd moved into a nice, pretty little home then. And I said, okay. So 2 days, I believe it was 2 days, maybe 3, after Heath, and he was my 3rd grandchild. In the meantime, Krista Michelle Boatinghouse was born to Yvonne and Steve Boatinghouse in June the 7th in 1970. And so she was my first granddaughter. And then later, in that same month, Heath was born on June the 30th in 1970. So the reason I'm telling you this is to show you the difference in how you feel with your first and second child. So Michael called me. I think Heath was 3 days old, because she had just gone home from the hospital. And he said, Mama, he said, Janae's really having a bad time. You think you could come over and stay with her? And I said, well, yeah. I said, is Doris not going? He said, no, Doris is unhappy with her mother, so with Janae, so she wouldn't come and stay with her. Anyway, I went over there, and poor Janae, of course, you might remember, in 1961, I had a hemorrhoidectomy. For a year, I suffered, no one knows unless they've had it, how much. Anyway, when I got over there, she could hardly walk because her hemorrhoids were so bad. So, of course, Heath was just a tiny baby in his bed, but John was 2 years old, and he needed care. So I run a tub of hot water, and I said, now Janae, you go in there and you sit in that tub of hot water till I come back. If Heath wakes up, you just let him cry. I won't be gone long. Anyway, I went to the drugstore and I took John with me, and we got some medication for her. And she came back and we used the medication, and I said, now you put your pajamas on, you go to bed, and you stay there. So anyway, I took care of John and Heath that day, and that evening I went in there and she was getting up, and I said, what are you getting up for? She said, well, I was going to cook Michael's supper. I said, what do you think I'm over here for? I said, you get back to that bed. As long as I'm here, you're going to just be a lady of leisure and sit up there and eat bonbons or whatever. So anyway, she did that, and from then on, I'd call, and I was still selling real estate at the time. I'd say, I don't have any duties this weekend. Can I come over and keep the kids? She said, if you can't come over, she said, I'll bring them over there. So this is the difference in your first child. She wouldn't let us keep John when he was little, because she wanted to do everything herself. But now, when Heath was born, and of course I understood this as a mother-in-law, and Janae and I got along fine. We never had any problems. In fact, I was surprised one time. A lady over there, I was visiting, a lady was there, and she said, well, you sure have in with your daughter-in-law? And I said, oh. She said, yeah. I said, somebody called her and asked her a question not too long ago. And she said, well, I don't know, but she said, I'll call my mother-in-law. She knows everything. But of course, that's not so. But anyway, I had a good rapport with Janae. So this goes back to, early, 1970. And I brought y'all up to date with Elsie being here and grandmother being here. So, grandmother passed away August 11th, as I said, in 1999. I'm rambling and going back and forth, but that's okay. And after she died in August, I had major surgery on my eyes in September of 1999. Well, that's when my eyesight I went to supposed to have been a specialist, but they almost ruined the sight in my right eye. So I have probably 80 vision in my right eye. Excuse me, my eyes water quite a bit. So I ended up finally, I had a terrific, horrendous, painful infection in my right eye. And after a month of almost wishing I'd go to the world beyond, I found a doctor that would cure my eye. I don't know if you've ever had eye problems, but this felt like somebody pushing a knife in my eye and just twisting it around. I'd lay down and I'd get comfortable. I'd be afraid to move, afraid the pain would be so horrendous. So if you've never lived without pain for 30 days, or with pain for 30 days, you'll understand what I mean. And really, I can understand why people take an overdose, because when you've had pain so long and so much, you get to the point where you'll do anything to get rid of the pain. So it's understandable to me how people can either unconsciously or consciously take an overdose of medication if they're in pain. Now, not if they're just trying to get on a high or something of that sort. But after that, my real estate, I put my license on hold for a while, but I never did go back because my sight wasn't good enough to drive at night and do a lot of the things that I should have done, being a realtor. So after about 2 years of having my license on hold, I sent it back into Austin, because it was costing me probably $1,000 a year just to keep my license up and all the dues and everything you have to pay. So I didn't see any point in, in doing that.
Nana, tell me the story about the counterfeit bills.
Oh, in Grandpa Barnes died, the kid's Grandpa Barnes died in 1973. Well, Grandma Barnes lived in the house for, I was trying to remember how long. I can't remember exactly how long, probably a couple of years. So she put her house on the market for sale. Well, they had some acreage and 2 old houses, and when I say old, I do mean old. They had running water and a bathroom in the house, but that's about the consensus of their amenities in their house.
Where was the house located?
It was located on 44th Street in Oklahoma City. and they had probably, was it 15 acres they had there? Anyway, maybe 5 acres, and 2 pretty run-down houses. So they listed it with a realtor up there, and of course I had nothing to do with it, but they sold it, they got a contract on it for VA. Well, they called and asked what I thought about it, and I said, that house will not sell VA. I said, don't put a VA contract on it. I said, VA would require so much. I think the house was only listed at about 15,000, 18,000, anyway, it was below 20,000. I said, don't accept that contract. Get a conventional loan. Well, this is a good old boy, and we're going to let him go ahead and try it. Well, say it was listed 15,000. They came back and they was going to have about $9,000 worth of repairs. So they couldn't accept the contract. They wouldn't do all the repairs, and the man wouldn't buy it. So they put it back on the market. Well, after a few months, they sold the house again, and they had a cash buyer. So there wasn't a lot of problems about it. But when they sold the house, Sam read the contract to me, and I said, well, Sam, you have her moving out the same day she's closing. I usually give my people at least 1 day to get out of their house. And he said, oh, the man's a good old boy, he said she could stay in there as long as she wanted to stay. You know, if it'd take her a week to move, that's okay. I said, well, okay, Sam, but I have found that when people write a contract, after the deed is done, they want to live up to the letter of the contract. But anyway, they went ahead and let the contract stand as it was. Well, about 9 o'clock one night, this realtor called me, and she said, Ms. Barnes, she said, you're the only one I can find. She said, I can't get a hold of Sam Barnes. And she said, this man, my client, called, and he wants to move in that house in the morning. And he said Mrs. Barnes hadn't even packed or hadn't even tried to move, had any work done to move. I said, well, let me call Sam. So anyway, I called Sam. And of course he was really unhappy because the man had told him this. I didn't say a word to him. I just said, Sam, the man is moving in the morning. You're going to have to get up there and help your mama get out. So anyway, the long and short of it was he and Roger had to, I guess, I don't know whether they knew somebody to rent trucks, but they took trucks up there, and they moved her out. It took them all night. They went up there with 2 trucks, and it took them all night until about noon the next day to get her out of that house. Well, the reason I'm telling you this story, the man, as I said, had a cash offer. So when he got to closing, there was no problems. But about 3 weeks later, the title gal called me, and she said, Mrs. Barnes, and of course I don't know why they called me, because I had nothing to do with it. They wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't let me tell them how to write a contract or anything. So I said, but she had my number, and she didn't know who else to call. So she said, we got a problem. And I said, what do you mean we got a problem? She said, well, you know the man that bought the house? And I said, yeah. I understood who he was. She said, well, she said half of the money that he paid for that house was counterfeit. And I said, what do you mean? I said, do you mean that you actually accepted cash money? You didn't require him to get a cashier's check? I said, I've never closed a house and not had a cashier's check. She said, well, it was less than $20,000, so we didn't think, said, in fact, we just goofed, said we just didn't think, didn't dawn on us the money to be counterfeit. And I said, well, what do you mean we have a problem? What do you want me to do about it? Well, I thought you might talk to them, and y'all might want to share it with the loss with us. And I said, what do you mean? I said, that's your problem. I said, we paid for having a title policy, and you issued a title policy to give a clear title. I said, we don't have a problem, hon. I said, you got the problem. So anyway, that was the end of that. But it was kind of ironic the way things happened in that deal. And of course, I could tell you stories of lots and lots of deals, but every realtor has the good and bad ones. So,
what's your worst deal you ever had?
let me think. Well, you know, actually, I didn't have a lot of worse deals because of the fact that when I never sold a house that I talked the people into buy it. When I'd show a house and people say, I want to go back and buy that house, I said, okay, let's go back and look at it one more time. I have found that if people look at a house and say, well, for instance, I had a couple come down here from Missouri, I believe. Anyway, they came down here from Missouri, and they wanted to buy a house. Well, we had a lot in common because they had 6 children, and they had left their children at home with some of them were, large enough. And so I picked out 5 houses to show them. I never showed more than 5 houses until I went back to the office and regrouped. Well, the second house I showed them was one of the best houses because it was only about 11 months old in a fantastic area, and it was in their price range. And then I showed them 2 more, and one of them was my listing. Well, the wife liked the second house I showed them, the newer house, and the man liked the other one because it had a little bit more square footage, but it was tired. It needed new paint and needed new carpet, and he said, I'll do that, a little bigger lot. And he said, Miss Barnes, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd listen to my wife. I said, actually, that other house is the best buy because it's brand new, 11 months old, the people were transferred. And he said, we came down here, we've got a whole week to find a house. And she said, that's what you think. She said, I came down and I planned to buy a house today because I've been home with 6 kids while you've been down here working, and said, this is going to be my vacation. So anyway, this is what they did. They went back and they ended up buying that house. But the reason I'm telling you this, I had them to go back and look at the house the second time, because if you like it better the second time, then it's okay. But if you find too many things wrong with it, well, then we find another house. So I was trying to think if I had to, I'll tell you that my worst experience with the house was, I was showing a $750,000 house. And the man was going to pay cash for it. Well, this was the first time I had ever had a contract on a $750,000 house. And actually, the house belonged to Mary Kay Ash's son, who is the head of Mary Kay Cosmetics. And the man had a lot of gold, and this was before the gold standard went off, and you couldn't sell gold if you had. I've forgotten exactly what the problem is, but he had a lot of gold. And when it came time to close the house, they were supposed to have lifted the gold standard so he could get rid of his gold and buy the house, but it didn't happen. So the deal fell through. Well, I'd worked on that for about 2 months, so I guess that was my worst experience in selling real estate, because, of course, I never count my chickens before they're hatched anyway. I hadn't counted on that. But that house was fantastic. It had a ceiling that cost $15,000 that they had brought in from someplace in Europe. Wow. And but Mary Kay, at that time, Mary Kay's cosmetic company was in problems, and her son was head of it. And he had started building the house, and he just remodeling it, and he had just got part of it remodeled. It wasn't bad condition, but he was remodeling it to his taste. And so he put it on the market for sale. If it had been finished, it'd probably been worth about $2 million. But anyway, their fortune turned, and things got better, and so he ended up finishing up the house, and I don't know whether he still lives in it or not. But that was my worst scenario about real estate.
John's leaving.
Okay.